So the almighty algorithm decided to bestow upon me a video about why orcas don't kill and eat people. I had been watching shark content before going to sleep at night, so I guess it makes sense. The video is entitled, "Why the Ocean's Deadliest Predator Refuses to Kill Us," and it seems to be part of a trend of similarly themed videos. But this video took about 20 minutes to get to explaining why orcas don't kill us. Basically, the long and short of it is that their sonar can penetrate animal hides and return signals with data about things like blubber density. When they send pulses through us, they know we aren't seals or any of their other typical prey items, and so they ignore us. At least, that's part of why they ignore us.
The sound waves deliver an unmistakable physical data point to their brains. This creature lacks the required biological blubber. It is not a seal.
Sharks have nothing like this, which explains why sometimes they'll attack and then release someone. They can only determine that we're not their typical prey items once they sample us, so to speak. Of course, sharks often eat us anyway, so there's that. Which reminds me of the statistic that you're less likely to be attacked by a shark than struck by lightning. This always seemed somewhat absurd to me. Indeed, if you normalize for time spent in water, your chances of being attacked by a shark go up considerably. I didn't do any exhaustive research into the matter, but queries to ChatGPT yielded a response that 1 hour in the water runs a risk of 1 out of 1.59 million. 10 hours in the water, 1 out of 159,000. 20,000 hours, 1 out of 80. Now, whatever the numbers actually are, I'm sure the basic premise that the more time spent in water equals higher risk of a shark attack, especially in places like the Red Triangle. Orcas, however, are an entirely different matter. In fact, there's practically zero risk of you being attacked by one, even if you're surrounded by a pod of them in the ocean for days on end. There are no recorded instances of orcas attacking humans in the wild. In the wild being the operative phrase here because there have been various instances of them killing their trainers in captivity. As to why this is the case, it probably has to do with the fact that orcas don't operate on pure instinct. They have something analogous to human culture. Learned behaviors are very prevalent in them. Although we can't discern the extent of their language complexity, they absolutely do use echolocation pulses, whistles, and clicks to communicate, and these systems vary depending on the pod. For example, there are 3 distinct orca ecotypes off the coast of the northwestern United States: the offshore, the transients, and the residents. They don't interbreed or even interact. They have their own acoustic dialects and different hunting and behavioral patterns. The resident group eats mostly salmon, transients eat marine mammals, and the offshore eat a lot of sharks. This is where the aforementioned video got particularly interesting. In reference to the cruelty of placing orcas in captivity, the author states that, quote, "The nightmare begins with their very own biological strengths. In the ocean, orcas can see the world through sound waves. But when confined to a tank, their echolocation clicks continuously slam against the smooth concrete walls and bounce back with intense amplification, causing acoustic sensory overload. Scientists describe it this way: it is akin to being locked in a tiny closet and forced to listen to your own screams echoing endlessly day and night. The psychological torture does not end there. In the wild, orca families have their own distinct cultures and dialects. Yet marine parks routinely capture random individuals from completely different oceans globally and throw them into the same enclosure. Forcing creatures that do not speak the same language to cohabitate in a cramped space with no escape route has birthed a bloody gladiator arena. The vast majority of captive orcas bear raking scars, deep lacerations caused by the teeth of their tank mates. Driven to extreme frustration, they spend hours gnawing on steel gates and concrete ledges," unquote. Tragically, this bears a striking resemblance to the complaints of human multiculturalism, and yet, I imagine the video's author, and most of its 4.5 million viewers, would never draw any parallels. But like orcas, humans are extremely intelligent beings. We have many learned behaviors, languages, and cultural customs, and when we are forced into a relatively small but shared environment, violence or friction can and often does erupt. We don't share the same life outlooks or historical backgrounds. A behavioral cue in one group may mean something entirely different in another. For example, in some cultures, Avoiding eye contact can convey respect and reverence, whereas in other cultures, it is a sign of discomfort. In some cultures, price haggling is completely normal, whereas in others, it's taken as rude and inappropriate. Some of these differences can be minor irritations, such as time preferences. Other differences are much more dramatic. For example, some societies value female chastity to the point that they'll mutilate women's genitals. And yet, most people in the Western world today still insist that forcing all such disparate cultures together is a strength. What's worse is that the friction arising from it is often blamed on the host society, and it's deemed our responsibility to make the newcomer feel more at ease. For example, Minneapolis changed its noise ordinances to accommodate the Muslim call for prayer in 2023. The UK changed its laws about allowing open-air cremations in 2010 to accommodate Hindu religious practices. Sikhs have also been exempt from having to wear motorcycle helmets since 1976 and have been legally carrying knives in the UK since 1988. In 2016, Proposition 58 did away with California's earlier requirements for monolingual educational instruction in primary schools. And some of these accommodations don't even apply to quote-unquote immigrants.
The San Diego Unified School District is changing the way students are graded after it was revealed that minorities get worse grades compared to white students. The board approved the new grading policy last week.
While much of what I'm saying here may be taken as provocative, I'm not claiming I think our current cultural state in the West has nothing wrong with it. There's something highly dysfunctional about permitting abortions up to birth, pursuing AI companionship as the solution to loneliness, and freeing violent criminals who murdered children out of concerns of racism. While I do sometimes find other cultures abhorrent, by some metrics, they're more functional than ours at the moment. Consider here the words of Jared Taylor, quote, "According to current thinking, the French absolutely do not have the right to live undisturbed by outsiders. On the contrary, people from all over the world have the right to move there. This is astonishing, really. I can't think of a single thing that New Guineans have contributed to the world, and yet their way of life will endure. That of the Europeans, who have immensely enriched the world, may not." Unquote. Of course, people here will scream to high heaven that the French engaged in colonialism and slavery, while ignoring that the New Guineans historically ate people, and that today 41% of males there have reportedly raped someone.
So he's eaten one man
One man,
and one woman.
one woman.
Is there any difference between the taste of a man and a woman? Did anyone ever eat a white man? Okay, so we've never seen a white man, so you didn't have the opportunity of eating a white man. It's fair enough.
With those stats in mind, let's return to the idea that getting struck by lightning is more likely than being attacked by a shark.
66 times.
As we already discussed, this is false when you normalize for time spent in the water. But it did get me curious, so I asked ChatGPT if a motorcycle trip across South America is more dangerous than being a surfer in shark-infested waters. It responded that yes, it is, by orders of magnitude. Quote, "A robbery is roughly 30 to 300 times more likely per hour of motorcycle travel than a shark attack is per hour in the Red Triangle." Unquote. Here's something else I asked ChatGPT. Which is statistically safer for a solo female European traveler? Backpacking in Pakistan for a month, or swimming in the Red Triangle for 8 hours a day until she has spent a total of 720 hours swimming in the shark-infested waters? Now, the reason for that specific amount of hours is because it amounts to a similar period of environmental exposure. Swimming 8 hours a day in the water for a month would not equal the same exposure time as spending an entire month in Pakistan, where exposure to Pakistani culture would be continuous all day and night, no matter the activity. And obviously, a person cannot swim in the ocean for a month straight, hence the framing of the question. The response was that swimming in the Red Triangle was safer, or rather, it stated that it would, quote, "choose the Red Triangle as statistically safer than a month of solo backpacking through Pakistan." To be fair, ChatGPT did offer many disclaimers. The comparison, like the former, is difficult because while we have good data on shark attacks in the Red Triangle, the figures are not denominated in swim hours. Pakistan, ChatGPT claims, is harder to quantify because there isn't a comparable dataset of bodily injuries suffered by solo European female backpackers per traveler hour. This is reasonable, but ChatGPT did state unequivocally, nevertheless, that if forced to choose which activities were safer based on the available data, it would choose swimming in shark-infested waters over backpacking in Pakistan, and that's remarkable. Again, this is a provocative frame, but the point is, some cultural exchanges are literally more hazardous than swimming in the Red Triangle, and yet we continue to insist that they are all purely beneficial and enriching. Returning to the phenomenon of orcas becoming violent against their captors and trainers, I tentatively offer the notion here that multiculturalism may cause similar mental health crises. I suspect that the leading causes of testosterone drops in men today are mostly due to obesity, changes in diet, and increasingly sedentary lives.
I'm authorizing a new screening program for testosterone deficiency.
This is a slippery slope, okay? We're like one headset briefing away from gas station boner pills. You know what I mean?
But there are some studies showing that an individual's sense of inclusion or exclusion can either raise or lower his testosterone levels. And multiculturalism does seem to have a tendency to make no one feel fully included or at ease.
I loved history in school, but what I got taught didn't resonate with me. I got taught names of kings and queens, of princes and princesses, but nothing about anybody who looked like me.
In situations where the minority immigrant population has not yet fully established itself in the host society, that is, when there isn't a fully functional enclave, an individual from that identity group is thrust into a new environment and feels alienated. This is often cited as a rationale for why minorities and migrants in the West need more representation in media and why public resources need to go toward providing them with basic services in their own languages. In essence, the aim is to create a little Mogadishu in Minnesota so that Somalis feel more comfortable being around foreign people, cultures, and customs. These are all things I discussed years ago in a video about the New York Times article entitled, "New Hampshire, 94% white, asks, how do you diversify a whole state?" As that article stated, quote, "New Hampshire, like its neighbors Vermont and Maine, is nearly all white. This has posed an array of problems for new arrivals who often find themselves isolated and alone, without the comfort and support of a built-in community," unquote. Now, in cases where the incoming immigrant population has established an enclave and is beginning to displace locals, cases may arise where an individual from the indigenous community will feel alienated in his or her own neighborhood, school, or job. Multiculturalism and mass migration are also probably contributing to the rise in mass shootings and terrorist attacks. Again, neither the immigrant or the native feels completely at home with the new arrangements. Both feel isolated and alienated. The migrant is told over and over again that his host is evil and thus he attributes all his problems to the larger society. As a result, he lashes out. The native is likewise told that he is responsible for all the world's ailments and that the newcomers are better than him. As a result, he withdraws and becomes depressed. Now, obviously, some attacks are simply the result of individual mental illness, a religious or ideological framework, or bullying and other forms of social isolation. On the other hand, social isolation in general is increasingly the result of us living online, and it seems apparent that mass migration tends to contribute significantly to the deterioration of traditional social institutions and networks, which likely pushes more people online. Because the topic of this video was originally about whales, and because I recently released an 8-hour series on Star Trek, I do want to highlight here that in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, the entire premise of the film centered on humpback whales. An alien probe shows up and begins emitting a strange signal that no one can decipher. For some reason, the pulse will eventually destroy the entire planet if nothing is done. Luckily though, Spock, the smartest, most virtuous being alive, figures out that the signal is highly similar to that of humpback whales that have sadly gone extinct in the 23rd century. Naturally, the crew then travels back in time to the 20th century, as Star Trek often does because, after all, the series is meta-commentary on that era. There's a scene where McCoy sees a woman pay for a newspaper with a headline about a stalled nuclear arms summit. He declares, quote, "It's amazing these people ever got out of the 20th century," unquote. And yet there's a strange irony in that the newspaper rack was one that only worked in a relatively high-trust society. That is, one where you inserted the coin and then had access to the entire supply of newspapers inside. Considering the ethnic and racial components to the debate today about playing loud music on public transportation, it's notable that Kirk is disturbed by a white punk rocker playing loud music on a bus. He politely asks him to lower the volume. The man gives him the finger, and Spock uses the Vulcan nerve pinch to assault him, and the entire bus claps. In today's reality, Spock might have been stabbed, and the liberal journalist class would have come to the defense of the culprit, while insisting that Spock and Kirk were racist for merely wanting peace and quiet. But in any case, the crew retrieves 2 humpback whales from a marine zoo and brings them into the 23rd century so that they can communicate with the alien probe. After the whales communicate with the alien probe leaves, and everyone lives happily ever after. It turns out that the probe was from an ancient super advanced civilization that had communicated with the humpback whales in antiquity. Needless to say, I find all of this ham-fisted and half-baked. If the probe were truly from a super advanced civilization that could travel across the galaxy and communicate with marine mammals in the ocean, then it stands to reason that they would have been able to understand that their signal was going to boil off the oceans and destroy the entire planet. Something you don't want to do if you're trying to communicate with marine life forms you traveled across the galaxy to meet. Naturally, being a Star Trek film, the theme was about multiculturalism, cosmopolitan individualism, and post-scarcity utopianism. But it was also about chastising us for failing to live up to specific ideals of environmentalism and conservationism. It was about highlighting where our actions would lead if we didn't alter our behaviors. In this case, the extinction of humpback whales. But what will happen if we don't alter our current actions with regards to multiculturalism? It's entirely possible that Westerners will go extinct, and yet the response to this is one of apathy at best and jubilation at worst. Indeed, we have more of a desire to save the whales than we do ourselves, and that's equally bizarre, fascinating, and tragic. What comes to mind here in all this is how public perception actually works. In the grand scheme of things, it may be safer to swim in the Red Triangle than it is to wander into certain neighborhoods or travel in certain regions, but the public won't think in those terms. Films like Jaws, A Time to Kill, and Deliverance, among others, have cemented their views. Popular culture has solidified certain forms of sensationalist thinking, while it has often vilified what might have been relatively reasonable conclusions. The public will assume, for example, that some backwater small town is more dangerous, creepy, and threatening than some inner-city ghetto. You can go ahead and cite stats all day, but a person will always default to what their cultural milieu has conveyed to them via cinema and sociological reinforcement. Reason has very little bearing on the matter. Crime stats simply can't compete with the likes of Captain Kirk and Commander Spock.